Here is your
Time to
story.
pay the
Dash,
rent.
dash, dash.
What? It's
There
that
is a
time already?
specific kind of shame
Afraid
that lives
so.
in your
I need
chest
a
when you
raise.
are a grown adult who cannot pay their rent. It is not loud shame. It does not announce itself. It sits quietly behind your sternum like a stone, heavy and permanent, and it is there when you wake up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling, and it is there when you hear footsteps in the hallway outside your door, and it is most certainly there on the 1st of the month when you open your banking app for the 4th time that day hoping the numbers have somehow rearranged themselves in your favor and they have not. My name is Caleb Marsh. I was 29 years old, recently laid off from a marketing firm that had eliminated my entire department in a single Wednesday afternoon meeting, the father of a 6-year-old boy named Theo who believed with his whole heart that everything was going to be fine because his dad always figured things out, and I was 42 days behind on rent. The apartment was on Birchwood Street in Cincinnati, Ohio, a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a pale yellow house that had wooden window boxes and a porch swing and a landlady named Miriam Castillo who had owned the property for 22 years and lived in the unit directly below mine. I had been her tenant for 16 months. In that time she had accepted my rent in cash on the 1st of every month, brought Theo a slice of birthday cake through the downstairs window when she heard us celebrating in July, and once sat with me on the front steps for 40 minutes when she found me out there at midnight unable to sleep, 2 weeks after my divorce had finalized. She hadn't cried. She'd brought out 2 cups of chamomile tea and talked about her late husband, Ramon, and the garden he'd planted in the backyard that she still maintained because it felt like keeping a conversation going. I had slid a note under her door on the 28th of September. I had written it 4 times before I got the words right. It explained the layoff, the job search, the unemployment claim that was still processing, the child support obligation I was meeting through sheer credit card debt. It said I would pay everything I owed the moment I was able. It said I was sorry. That last part one meant in a way that went beyond the money. She knocked on my door the following morning at 8:15. Theo was eating cereal at the kitchen table, still in his dinosaur pajamas, and I was standing at the counter with a cup of coffee I had made mostly to have something to hold. When I heard the knock I set the mug down and stood very still for a moment, the stone in my chest suddenly heavier than it had been in weeks. I opened the door. Miriam Castillo was 5'3", with silver-streaked dark hair she kept in a braid over one shoulder and reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her forehead. She was wearing a cardigan the color of a cardinal and carrying a manila envelope. Her expression was not the expression I had been bracing for. It was not stern or disappointed or carefully neutral the way people's faces go when they are about to say something difficult. She looked like herself. Warm, unhurried, present. "May I come in?" she said. I stepped back. She came in, nodded hello at Theo, who said, "Hi, Miss Miriam," without looking up from his cereal because he was 6 and cereal was extremely important, and she sat down at my kitchen table and set the manila envelope in front of her and folded her hands on top of it. I sat across from her. I had the irrational urge to apologize again, to fill the silence with words, but something in her stillness held me in place. "I read your letter twice," she said. "I want you to know that. Miriam, I want to be clear that I fully intend to." She held up one hand. Not unkindly. Just firmly. "My husband Ramon lost his job in 2003, she said. "We had just bought this house. Theo's age, our youngest was." She smiled faintly at the coincidence of the name. "We were 3 months behind on the mortgage before he found steady work again." 3 months. I remember what that felt like. I remember it like it was last Tuesday. She paused. Our neighbor at the time was a woman named Betty Fogarty. She brought groceries to our porch twice without telling us she'd done it. We only knew it was her because Ramon saw her car one time. She looked at me steadily. I have thought about Betty Fogarty more times in my adult life than she will ever know. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say yet. She slid the manila envelope across the table. "Open it," she said. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. It was a revised payment agreement. She had written it out by hand in her careful, looping script. The back rent I owed was not forgiven. She was too practical and too honest for that, and I would not have accepted it if she had. But it was restructured across 8 months at an amount so manageable it would not require me to choose between it and feeding Theo. And at the bottom, in a separate paragraph, was something that stopped my breath. She had written down a contact name and phone number. A man named Gerald Park at a mid-sized communications firm in downtown Cincinnati. Below his name, in parentheses, she'd written, Raymond's former colleague. I called him yesterday. He is expecting to hear from you. They need a marketing director. I told him you were the best tenant I'd ever had, which is true. Asterisk. I looked up at her. Her expression had not changed. Warm, unhurried, present. You called someone, I said. My voice was not entirely steady. I made one phone call, she said simply. I've been meaning to catch up with Gerald for ages. This was a good reason. She said it the way you say something when you want a person to accept help without the weight of obligation crushing them. She said it like it was nothing, because she understood that was the only way I could receive it. Theo climbed down from his chair and padded over to show Miriam something on the back of his cereal box, some diagram of a triceratops he found compelling, and she studied it with the gravity it deserved and asked 3 sincere questions about the horns, and he answered all of them with authority, and I sat at my kitchen table holding a piece of paper that had just quietly rearranged the trajectory of my life. I called Gerald Park that afternoon. I had a phone interview 4 days later and an in-person interview the following week and an offer on a Thursday morning 11 days after Miriam had sat at my kitchen table with a manila envelope and folded hands. I paid back every dollar I owed her by February. I slid the cash under her door in an envelope the same way I'd slid the note, with a letter of my own. I wrote it 4 times before I got the words right, same as before. I told her what the job had meant, what the restructured agreement had meant, what the phone call to Gerald Park had meant. I told her about Theo asking me recently why I always smiled when we drove past the yellow house, because we had moved to a bigger apartment by then, a few miles east. I told her I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be when I grew up, and lately the answer looked a lot like her. She texted me 3 days after I slid the envelope. She was 63 years old and she texted the way people do when they learned late. Full sentences, perfect punctuation, a period after every line. Received your letter. Read it twice. Ramon would have liked you very much. Take care of that boy, Miriam. Asterisk. I have kept that text. I will keep it a long time. There is a specific kind of feeling that lives in your chest when a stranger decides to treat you like you are worth believing in. It is not loud, either. It doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, quietly, long after the moment has passed, and it makes you want to do something with it. Pass it forward. Find your own Betty Fogarty moment, your own manila envelope, your own one phone call that costs you nothing and means everything to somebody who is sitting at their kitchen table at 8 in the morning, holding a cup of coffee mostly to have something to hold, waiting to find out what kind of world they actually live in. I know what kind of world I live in. Miriam Castillo taught me that on a Tuesday morning in October, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a cardigan the color of a cardinal, like something out of a dream you didn't know you needed.